Yes, hello. Lovely to see many of you that I've met before. For those of you I don't know, my name is Jules Good. I use they, them pronouns. I work at the Autistic Self Advocacy Network as the state advocacy manager, but I'm also super involved in disability policy at the state and national level. Most of my work centers around grassroots organizing and comms. I've done a fair amount of media work with disability policy and kind of thought up the idea for this workshop because I realized, op-eds and LTEs are a really powerful way for our community to have our perspective heard and to be part of the discussions about issues that really impact us on a day-to-day basis. So excited that you're all joining us. um, just to kind of set the playing field, what are we talking about when we say op-eds and LTEs? So op-eds, it's short for opposite the editorial page, but no one ever calls it that. People just call it op-eds. And it's basically a longer piece where the author shares their opinion about something that's happening in the news. And I have a few examples linked here that I'll throw up once we kind of do the review. The idea with op-eds is to either share everyday people's thoughts on what's happening in the news, and it's also used to showcase subject matter experts. So oftentimes, people who work in a field that's relevant to a particular news issue will submit an op-ed. So here's an example from the director at NAMI, New Hampshire, National Alliance on Mental Illness. She submitted an op-ed talking about the impact that Medicaid cuts would have on the people that she serves in her work. And so she's like someone who works in the field, has a lot of street cred as the executive director of this organization, and she's using the op-ed as a platform to share her thoughts and her professional opinion on what's going on with Medicaid, which is something that's being talked about a lot, in the news. Letters to the editor, LTEs, short for letter to the editor, are a shorter response to a news article. Sometimes they're used to respond directly to something that a news outlet has already published. And sometimes outlets publish letters that don't respond to a specific article, but they're still about something that's relevant. So they can be used as kind of similar to an op-ed, but just a shorter format. Outlets tend to publish more letters to the editor. So there's kind of a higher likelihood of being published if you submit an LTE versus an op-ed. We'll talk more about that in a minute here. So why are op-eds and LTEs important? First of all, they showcase perspectives that are not found in reporting. Obviously, journalists can't know everything or capture the totality of the human experience. And so getting opinion pieces from people with lived experience, people who are experts on a particular issue, helps to get more information to people about the issues that a news outlet is reporting on. It also gives a personal local voice on news issues, which I think is really important. Oftentimes, when you're reading a news article that's just reporting the facts, it can be hard to understand, how this impacts everyday people or to get like the emotional resonance behind an issue. When we hear from opinion pieces, we're often hearing people's personal stories and how this is impacting their everyday life or people in their community. And that's really powerful. It also helps people see issues from a different point of view, kind of for the same reason. Again, like just classic reporting the facts journalism doesn't capture like every opinion or every perspective on a particular issue. And so it gives people different perspectives on what's happening. It also is a great way to show legislators and other decision makers that people care about an issue. If there are lots of op-eds or letters being published from community members about something, that's a pretty good indicator that people are thinking about it, they're talking about it, they care about it. So it's a great way to to mobilize people behind a particular issue. And really important in the disability world, I have found op-eds and LTEs are a great way to push back on harmful narratives. Many of us know that, journalism and communications work in general has come a long way when it comes to talking about disability, but we still have a long way to go. And op-eds and LTEs can give us an opportunity as people with lived experience to correct harmful narratives and to, share a perspective that isn't often showcased in the news. And so I think it's a very powerful way to do that in particular. I'm just going to check the chat really quick. Okay, cool. Great. So what should we write op-eds about? Op-eds and LTEs about? There are lots of different things. Usually we want to focus on something that's being talked about in the news, like in the present moment. So right now, if we're kind of talking about the disability policy realm, Medicaid is a super important one. We've seen lots of op-eds and LTEs out there, including a very good one that was recently published in the Union Leader from Patricia, who's here with us, which we'll share in a bit because it's really great. But that is a big one. And then also, any of the other work that ABLE is doing around special education, housing, voting rights, anything that's being reported on in the news or that people are, talking about, can be good fodder for an op-ed or an LTE. Are there other ideas or thoughts that people have about potential op-ed or LTE topics? Let's say you were going to submit one next week. What's something that you might write about? You can either come off of mute or you can put your answer in the chat box.
For me, except for the last 2 days, wow, the weather has been pretty bad this spring. I would write a letter
about the weather,
about how bad it's been. Except yesterday, it was so dang nice. I guess that's out the window.
I have one.
Janice said, I actually got one published when the topic was totally being missed by the news outlets. That's great, Janice. Yeah, that's an excellent way to make use of op-eds and LTEs too. We'll talk a bit about that as well. But yeah. Other thoughts? Kathy, go ahead.
DEI stuff.
DEI stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because that's a huge issue at UNH right now.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, absolutely. Representative Horrigan also said the anti-DEI stuff is bad for the disability community. Absolutely. Great answers. Oops, sorry. Patricia said, written several about Medicaid, care worker shortage, Trump's blaming disabled people for a plane crash. That was a wild one. Yeah, absolutely. Patricia is a seasoned op-ed and LTE writer. So we've kind of talked about potential topics. How do you know when the right time is to submit an op-ed or an LTE about a specific topic? The easiest way to do this is to monitor the news, right? Because the more an outlet is reporting on something, or the more something is kind of like in the zeitgeist, people are talking about it, the more likely it is that they'll want to publish opinion pieces about those topics. So keeping an eye on the news is a great way to kind of figure out your window of opportunity. Following New Hampshire news outlets on social media, if you're a social media user, is a great way to kind of see what's up. Another thing that you can do is set up Google News alerts for topics that you want to write about. So if you know, like, oh, I have a lot to say about like Medicaid, you might set up a news alert so that you get a notification when an article comes out about that topic. And then you can decide if you want to submit either a letter to the editor, in response to that specific article, or write a piece that's about that topic more broadly. So the way that Google News alerts work, is it okay that these are up here?
Yeah.
Okay. No. So you can see Colin has several alerts set up here about particular issues that he's following. But you could...
including myself, which is, some might say, the most important topic of all.
But if I wanted to create an alert about Medicaid, I could kind of set some filters here. So how often do I want it to notify me? Once a day. Sources, you can narrow it down to just news outlets. If you want to include blogs or other web posts, you can do that too. Language, regions, so you can have it be, is there a way to filter it by state? I don't know, but you could do, you could add the state. This is how I have mine set up. Medicaid plus New Hampshire, so that anything with Medicaid and New Hampshire, you get alerts
Could you
for.
make that one for me? That sounds great.
Yeah.
I'd love to get that.
And then, yeah, you can kind of mess around with the settings to figure out, what works for you in terms of the alerts you get. So then, yeah, you'll see when there's something to respond to. And as Janice mentioned, doing yeah, Janice said I have a Google News search alert and I would be lost without it. It's a really useful tool. But Janice had said that they submitted an op-ed on something that wasn't being talked about, right? That was important, that needed to be talked about. So if you're not hearing your perspective in a discussion, or there's something that you think isn't being reported on that's important to your community, submitting an op-ed or an LTE about that is a great way to get your perspective in there, and make sure that the things that you care about are being represented. So how do you submit an op-ed or an LTE? Every publication has its own process, and it's important that you follow the steps for each publication. But usually a great place to start is to go to the opinion or the letters section of a publication's website, and that usually has the submission instructions. It'll either be like an online form, or it'll say, contact this email address and give you the instructions. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts. There are also a number of advocacy groups that keep like lists of op-ed submission instructions and contacts for different outlets. And so that can be a useful resource too. But figuring out who to submit to is also important. So thinking about who your audience is, and then finding publications who serve that audience. So if I'm trying to reach right-leaning voters because I want to, tell them not to support cuts to Medicaid. Sorry, I clearly have Medicaid on the brain because it's all I do all day, every day. Then reaching out to a right-leaning publication could be a way to reach that audience. The other thing to consider is, there are some publications that will publish like a wider array across the spectrum of political opinions, and some that are only going to publish things that like their audience is going to agree with. So a good way to kind of gauge that is to look at the publication's existing op-ed and LTE submissions, and see, just kind of poke around in there and see what's getting published to see if you have a good shot. And And then also you can submit to many outlets at the same time. You don't have to wait to hear back from one before you submit to another. And a good practice when you're submitting is in your submission email or on the form or whatever, ask them to confirm that they've received your submission. And then if they get back to you and say, hey, we're going to publish this, ask for an expected publication date so that you know to look out for it. Because as we'll talk about in a bit, there's a lot you can do with an op-ed or an LTE after it's been published that can be really effective for advocacy. And I'm just gonna... Yes, Medicaid is on all of our minds for sure. Great, I think I'll pause here. Any questions so far?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this thing about submitting to many outlets at the same time. Now, I was kind of struggling with this last year when I had something that I wanted printed because I assumed that they would like to print unique material. And so I was kind of saying, hey, I haven't submitted this anywhere else. Would you please let me know if you want to print it? But then I wouldn't hear back from them. And then it was just very difficult. So it sounds like you're saying that they don't expect you to, they may expect that you're submitting it to a lot of places and they don't care.
Yeah, that's a great question, because this is something in many different roles that has come up time and time again. This idea that publications want an exclusive piece of content. Generally speaking, that is not the case. Generally speaking, newspapers are happy to get free material to put into on their website, to put into their newspaper. You are doing them a service in many ways by giving them material to print that for free. So there should be no expectation that this is exclusive to them, unless it is a very high level op-ed from an elected lawmaker, and there's an agreement for that in place. There are very few exceptions. So in a lot of ways, it's a numbers game. When you're submitting these op-eds, when you're submitting these LTEs, you want to get your message out to as many people as possible, and bulk submitting them, in my experience, is the vastly superior way to ensure that you're getting your message out there. And so submitting it to as many places as possible that are going to your targeted group is, generally speaking, always the way to go.
Yeah. That's so helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, there's been a lot of confusion and misinformation about that, even among high-level political operatives throughout the Washington, D.C., you name it. There's a lot of weird misinformation out there. But that is, if you take one thing away from tonight, that I hope people ditch that piece of misinformation, because it was hard to find information.
Lewis.
Sorry about that. So one question I have, when you submit, how long is the turnaround for them to publish? I submitted one early last week, and I'm sitting there I'm checking every single day. And then on Friday, I get an email, oh, by the way, we're going to, release it on Saturday. And I'm sitting there on Saturday scrolling through, and then it was finally published on a Monday. So I'm just kind of curious, what is it, typical paper by paper, or is it more, it really just depends on how busy their news day is?
Yeah. So it is definitely publication by publication. Some papers have their own dedicated staff that, opinion editors, that's their whole thing. And so you might see a little better turnaround. Some, obviously, if a publication has a print aspect to it, that might come into play where they need to hold it. I know the union leader is specific to that because they have a very dense schedule of when they're publishing what. So it could be several days, it could be weeks. In my experience, it's very much a squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of situation. If you are especially looking for one publication in particular to publish your work, I would just be very direct with whomever is responsible for publishing. Obviously, very polite, and obviously, but I would also say, hey, it would be great if I could get this out on Tuesday or some, a specific date, and then follow up. Just make sure, like, hey, really, like, my whole career is riding on this coming out next Tuesday. It would be so good. I would be so grateful if you could just provide me some level of confidence that this is coming out on Tuesday. If they can't do that, obviously they can't. But yeah, if you're just keeping open lines of communication, I don't want to say harassing, but if you are, forcefully, if you are persistent in maintaining proactive communication about getting something published, in my experience, you will get what you're looking for. Because again, you are providing free content to, a for-profit business who relies on getting content.
Yeah.
So
I'll also say I've had good luck like a lot of times, right, when we're putting out op-eds or LTEs like in our work, it's because we're like trying to like jazz people up before a specific vote, or like there's like a specific reason we're getting it out at the time we are. And if you tell that to like the opinion editor or whoever you're contacting and say like, hey, like I really want this to get out on this day because there's a vote happening on this issue on this day, and I talk about that bill in my piece or it's relevant, like just connecting those dots for them can be helpful as well. Awesome. Any other questions before we move on?
Can you move a little closer to the mic?
Can we move closer to the mic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Will do.
Thank you. I can't hear anything.
Oh, sorry, Kathy.
It's okay.
Guys, when you submit LDs, are you usually using their online form, or are you going through like an email?
Yeah, I mean every news site is different, and some of them will definitely prefer you use the form for various internal reasons, and some will ask for the email. Generally speaking, I will go through the form and then follow up with an email with an editor, whoever I can get a hold of. And like we said before, different advocacy groups have long like spreadsheets that kind of list every publication in the state, and they'll either have a link to the form or they'll have the email. They'll generally offer you some guidance for how to do that. So yeah, but generally speaking, I will always use their preferred method. I know a lot of news sites, it'll help their kind of their work pipeline if you are submitting it through their website. But yeah, generally speaking, I'll do whatever they ask and then follow up by email and then keep following up till I get what I want.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. What makes a good op-ed submission?
So, sorry. So, there's a number of things that I think are really important when you're writing an op-ed. Op-ed, obviously a longer piece. Like I was just saying, that great question, follow those submission instructions. Just make sure you're doing that. That will avoid, pissing anybody off or and keeping everything organized in the way different publications like to keep things organized. Also, and this is going to come up time and time again, people have very, very, very short attention spans these days. Maybe it's TikTok. I don't know. Something in the water. You really only have a couple seconds. So make sure whatever you're writing has a strong, unique hook. You need to grab your reader right off the bat. In an op-ed, it's also very important very early on to validate yourself. Talk about why you are a unique expert on a particular subject. You have to spend some time just saying, look, talking about your credentials, talking about your expertise, making sure that you are, in the reader's mind, shamelessly, are an expert in a given subject. What are some examples? Some examples of that. If I am writing about political communications or something, I'm going to talk about my background. I'm going to say, I spent years leading communication strategy, or I am, I'm talking about, my work as a reporter for years, writing for the Associated Press. Yeah.
I will also say, like, Colin is talking a lot about like professional credentials and expertise. I had a letter to the editor published in the Washington Post. And that was the way that I like established my credentials, was because of like lived experience that I had that was related to what they were talking about. They were talking about like a specific health condition that I have personal experience with. And so like, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, I am like the number one world expert in this particular subject. It can be like, I'm uniquely qualified to talk about this because I've experienced it firsthand.
Yes.
That's good to know.
Some other things to keep in mind when you're writing an op-ed, you're really driving a single message home. So you need to speak with authority, and you need to bring statistics. You need to bring research. You've got to bring all your weapons to the table. You're there to get something done. Very important. You're also there to capture a complete idea. So it is so important to come in with a very clear voice. You do not want to meander. You don't want to get caught on tangents. You are there to deliver one strong, long message. You need to give the complete idea top to bottom, and you need to deliver it as clearly as possible.
So to dive into that a little bit more, kind of parts of an op-ed. So first, like Colin said, catchy hook to grab the reader's attention. We'll share some examples of this a little later. Talking about what qualifies you to talk about the issue, again, can be personal, like lived experience expertise, professional expertise, combination of both, whatever. A clear, concise statement of your opinion. So you want something that's more or less worded as, I think X because Y. I think the cuts to Medicaid proposed in the governor's proposed budget are harmful because they will limit access to health care for hundreds of thousands of people. And then after that, you want to back up your claim. So supporting evidence can come from data, from quotes, facts from reliable sources, things to show that you're not the only person that has this opinion. There are other, other smart people thinking about this. Yeah, and then personal connection or anecdote. So why does this matter to you? Whether by virtue of your lived experience, your job, etc. And then building off of that, why should this matter to everyone, right? So it's not just like, I'm an expert and I think this is important, but it's also like, here's my experience and this is how it's going to impact lots of people, and here's why you should care about it. And then to close out, basically restating your opinion, this kind of clear, concise statement in a different way. So if you started with, I think X because Y, then maybe you close out with, because Y, I think X. Just to leave no room for interpretation about where you stand on the issue. Great. And then moving on to LTE submission.
Yeah. So for a good letter to the editor, it's very similar to an effective op-ed in many ways. Got to follow those instruction guidelines. Some publications have their own things just for LTEs. I think a lot of times you'll see like the website form submission for an LTE over an op-ed because they're so short. So it's more common, I would say, for LTEs. Again, the hook, I would say the hook is almost more important for an LTE because you have so little space to work with, you just gotta grab somebody right from the first line. It is so important. I'd also say because LTEs are significantly shorter than op-eds, you want to bring a lot of emotion. And I would say it's a good place if you're feeling angry about something to express it. Now, obviously, you want to be very articulate. You want to be very informed, but still a very good place to be authentic in your emotions. Conveying a strong emotion is going to connect you to the reader in a very fast, very effective way. Also, like I said, shorter, it's around 250 words. You don't have a lot of space to work with. That said, still, much longer than a tweet, right? So you still have a lot of space to convey a strong idea. Most of all, though, because it's so short, it is so unforgivable to bore somebody with an LTE. You cannot, if you are boring in an LTE, that's it. It's over. Like, you just have to be interesting the whole time. You have to have something very clear and important to say in that very short amount of space. So that is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, and I think just adding to that, like, there's more than one way to be captivating, right? And different people are going to resonate with different tones and different subject matter and stuff. So I think, prioritizing authenticity and being clear in how you feel and what your message is above all else, is kind of the most important thing. So parts of an LTE, it's basically the same parts as an op-ed, but it's condensed. An op-ed, different publications have different guidelines, but it's usually somewhere between like 500, 650 words. And LTE, like we mentioned, is usually closer to 200, 250 words. So it's a lot shorter. The only thing that gets added is if you're responding to a specific article, then you want to mention that article and clearly state how your opinion is similar to or different from the article you're responding to. So, you'd say something like, this publication published XYZ article by ABC, and I think that this part of the article is wrong because XYZ, right? So you're responding directly to something as opposed to just talking more generally about an issue. So now you've written your op-ed or your LTE, you've submitted it, you've gotten it published. A lot of people go, yippee yay, I got a publication, that's it. But the work is far from over because an op-ed or an LTE is a beautiful package that you can do so much with. And Colin is going to tell you more.
Yes. In most of the high-performing LTE op-ed programs I've worked on, look, it is so great if you get something published. You are getting it out there. You are exposing the readers of a publication to this idea, to this message. Very important. But there is so much more you can do with it once it is published. Because, as we know, we live in the United States. Most people do not read. You have to meet people where they are, and a lot of places where they are is on social media. And that is a great opportunity to move your LTE, your op-ed, away from the original publication and into this new space, your own space. Because what you're doing when you get an op-ed or an LTE published, you are validating your idea through this publication, right? It's no longer just an idea or a thought you're having or a piece of writing. It is published and it has the express, it comes with all of it's been validated by the publication it's coming through. So your goal after it's been published, get it all over social media as much as you can. Whether that is taking screenshots of it, taking snippets of it with a link, that's your number one goal. Like making sure you are sharing it far and wide in as many different formats as you can. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And you don't have to do all that work yourself. I think one of the best ways you can share it is going directly to organizations. I think Able is a great one. Sharing it with them and say, hey, look, I have published this material. It is exactly something you're working on. I'm wondering if you can help me get a larger audience for it. And they can share it on their channels. They can, all kinds of organizations are, their whole communication staff. This is their whole job. You can also share it with legislators. You know, legislators, they're always looking to make friends, especially here in New Hampshire. Lawmakers who are, if you're doing something friendly with them, they are more than happy to share it out. They are oftentimes grateful. They'll also expose it to a larger audience. And, you know, a couple, you know, we talked about how important it is to have that hook, that first line that really grabs people. Definitely leading with that. It's always great to make a graphic out of that. Or if you're comfortable, and not everybody is, I get that because I had to do this myself. If you're comfortable doing a video talking about it, social media algorithms, they love it when a little person goes in front of a video and just starts yapping. That gets a lot of shares, that gets a lot of engagement, and it's one of the best ways you can spread this LTE, this op-ed out. That and graphics, so important. So there is a really rich and robust life for this content after it's been published. And I think there's so many interesting ways to do that we just talked about. And it also just, by an order of magnitude, gets that message out across more channels. Because, like I said, it is great to get it published, but you can really breathe a lot of life into it if you work with it after it's been published, especially if it gets published in multiple places, because then you can do it over and over again with all these different places that have published it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So since we're doing pretty good on time, what I would like to do is kind of go through one or two examples of some op-eds and LTEs and kind of talk through how they showcase kind of those different parts that we were talking about. So I'm going to pull up Patricia's. Patricia, I hope I'm not embarrassing you, but it's a really good letter, which I'm sure many of you have read in the Union Leader. Oh, shoot. Are you... Let me open it. Oh.
If you log in,
No. Well, I'm not logged. I'm not. Oh, you have it here. Okay. Never mind. Got it. Okay. So, I'm just going to read this because I know it's kind of small. So it says, New Hampshire needs more help from Medicaid, not less. To the editor, my husband Jim and I own our home, pay taxes, and volunteer. Jim got his undergraduate degree from Southern New Hampshire University and his master's from Springfield College in Manchester. He worked for UNH and the state of New Hampshire for more than 30 years. In retirement, he shares his wealth of experience with young people with disabilities and new parents. His life is a beautiful, complex tapestry of obstacles and achievements, none of which would be possible without Medicaid providing caregivers to get him out of bed, cleaned, dressed, and fed. This is what Medicaid looks like. Disabled Granite staters forging their own paths, contributing to their communities, and enriching life for all of us. It looks like personal and professional achievement for someone who needs help getting out of bed. It looks like hope for parents trying to process a child's diagnosis. It looks like families saving Granite State taxpayers hundreds of millions each year by keeping loved ones out of expensive institutions. The U.S. House just passed a budget that included Medicaid cuts of $88 billion a year for the next 10 years. This means a 22% decrease in New Hampshire. It guarantees the 60,000 residents covered by Medicaid expansion will lose their health care entirely, just like Jim's evening caregiver who has Parkinson's and depends on this program for her treatment. New Hampshire needs more Medicaid, not less. Find out more about the threats we're facing and what you can do at nhneedsmedicaid.com. Boom! There's so much to love about this letter. So, starting right at the top, so we've got this hook is like, it's good because it's like kind of understated, but it leaves you wanting more, you know? You're like, oh, I'm reading about this person and her husband, Jim. what are we going to learn about Patricia and Jim? And then we get a great kind of personal anecdote, story, learning about him, and then figuring a really great transition, tying us in from learning about Jim to the issue that we're writing about, which is Medicaid, right? So we're making that connection right up front. And then there are so many good, like, one-liners in here that you could pull out for a graphic. Like, his life is a beautiful, complex tapestry of obstacles of achievements, none of which would be possible without Medicaid. I mean, come on. So lots of good stuff like that. We've got, some good, like, facts and data about, what Medicaid is, what it does for people. And then I really love that it closes with a call to action, right? And this won't always be possible, but when it is, I think it's a really good way to engage readers. So we say, find out more about the threats we're facing and what you can do at this website. So now people say, wow, I just read this awesome letter. I learned about this person and his story. I learned about why Medicaid is important to his life and to so many other people's lives in New Hampshire. And now I'm going to take action to protect Medicaid. So just really beautifully done, Patricia. Claps all around. Let's look at what was this one? Oh, that one. We'll go back to this one. This op-ed. So you can see this op-ed is longer. This is the one you pulled up earlier from Susan Stearns, who's the executive director of NAMI New Hampshire. So we start out with her hook is a statistic, right? Like a really big, important number. Medicaid is the lifeline for over 187,000 Granite staters. Whoa, that's a lot of people. We're about to talk about something that's important to a lot of people. And then she immediately establishes her credibility as the executive director at NAMI New Hampshire. I know firsthand the impacts Medicaid coverage can have on people with mental illness and their families. She talks about what Medicaid does for the people that she serves through her work. She cites some efforts from other organizations and ties that into what she's talking about with the importance of Medicaid. And then she makes it really clear, for all of these reasons, I'm deeply concerned that Congress is considering major cuts to Medicaid. And then she talks a little bit more about why those cuts would be so harmful. And then she also closes out with a call to action. NAMI New Hampshire urges Senator Shaheen, rest of the congressional delegation, to say no to any efforts to cap or cut Medicaid funding to our state. We urge our state leaders and all Granite staters to work together to protect our most vulnerable by protecting Medicaid. So kind of a similar structure to the other one that we read. So you can see that, like, a lot, if you look at lots and lots of op-eds and LTEs, they all sort of have these components. Sometimes they're in a different order, but all those kind of pieces are there. Lewis, that's a good question. Did she submit the bold points, or was that made by the paper? I don't know. I know there have been times where I've submitted where the paper has added emphasis to points, so that can be a thing that they do. But I'm not entirely sure in this specific case.
Sometimes, especially publications that have an opinion editor, they will take some license with trying to accentuate that. They'll also sometimes cut for content if your piece is too long, or if there's even something that they feel is not clear. I know the opinion editor, the union leader, will do both of those things. They take, they won't screw with it too much, but if it is a few words too long, or if they feel like something is not clear, they might tweak the language slightly, or put some emphasis on it. So not totally unheard of.
Yeah, and it's not always 100% guaranteed that they'll do this, but you can ask in your submission, or like after they've told you it's been accepted, you can say like, hey, if you're going to make any edits, can you like run them by me before it goes to print? They won't always do that, but you can at least ask. But like Colin said, usually the edits are more about like meeting word count, and like, you know, fixing typos and things like that. So that is what we had for you. I know we asked lots of great questions along the way, but any questions or thoughts that people would like to share now?
I guess I'll just raise my hand and start. When you do have one published and you want to keep that message going for long periods of time, how do you recommend kind of, you know, especially from like Abel's perspective, how do we keep that message going? Like, I know you mentioned like get the little clips, but can you progressively, you know, do more and more, or is it just kind of good to just to get one shot and just kind of keep posting it within like the week after it was published?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're looking to really push it out, I mean, I think a series of graphics so good, especially like carousel graphics where you're maybe pulling like you have like a title slide with like the logo of the organization, the publication that published it, and then slides, you know, with a couple excerpts. For some reason right now, social media algorithms love social like graphic carousels. They are so hot, and that is one great way. You can do a couple of those.
I will say, if you want a really good example of that, New Futures on their Instagram page is doing exactly what Colin was just talking about. If you want an example, they've done that with lots of stuff recently.
Yeah, they're really good. And then like you could do a single static graphic like in another post. You could do a little you know, AI reading the thing, you know, like have it typed out, or you can have the author. I always think it's really nice when the author kind of reads it. You know, just like, you know, a little video of somebody saying it. It really adds a different dimension if somebody's reading it, and can do that. I know that's a little like, not everybody, there's all kinds of reasons like people don't do that, but I think that's great. So yeah, like if you want, if you're, you know, invested, like absolutely, I would say like three separate posts across different formats scheduled over the course of a week. Yeah, you could really stretch that out. And sometimes, and like I said, like a lot of those things, it's a numbers game. So creating multiple social media posts for one LTE, you never know which ones are going to pop. So I always recommend, yeah, you know, making sure that that's getting out there and across different formats, because you could have one that really blows up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Janet.
So, I live in Brattleboro, Vermont now, and this is an example of something I've run into before. I've got something that's probably going to end up being a letter to the editor. I don't really want it in a Vermont paper. I want it in a New Hampshire paper. And I sometimes wonder, I mean, in some of my groups, you know, with my Google News alert, I'm like, hey, here's something cool that was just published in Georgia. Any Georgia people want to write a letter to the editor? Because I feel like me writing from Vermont, New Hampshire, they're going to be like, you know, we want our local people in our local paper. So, you know, can you talk about that like as a general concept, but also specifically with regard to the union leader, with me being, you know, a Vermonter? There is a slight tie-in to New Hampshire in the story, but it's a topic of national interest right now. So
I will say, in working in like advocacy organizations, there have been lots of times where I've like ghostwritten or like at least outlined something for somebody. Like yeah, like we at ASAN we had an org in the South that wanted to put out an op-ed about some policy thing down there, and they were asking for our guidance on like how they should talk about it and some of the stuff that should go in there. And so we like helped them draft it, but then it just went out under their names. So like if you don't care about getting like credit for it, then like helping people ghostwrite stuff can be really valuable. So like, you know, if Union Leader doesn't bite on your piece because you're in Vermont, like if there's, you know, someone in New Hampshire, and they could like tweak it a little bit to make your same points, but make it, you know, more true to them or whatever. That's one way to do it. Did you?
Yeah, I would also say two other ways you can frame it is, you know, New England is its own region, and you can say, you know, speaking as a neighbor, speaking as a concerned neighbor. Or if you are formerly of New Hampshire, you can say, you know, speak from your experience as somebody who, you know, you have this new perspective kind of from the outside looking in. I think that's always really interesting. And just, you know, just not trying to hide it, but using that experience, using that perspective, kind of flipping it to your advantage as much as possible, is always, I think, the best way to go. Because you see a lot of material written that way, you know, like people who are saying, you know, once you have a certain level of distance, it really does offer you kind of a different level of insight when you're seeing, you know, when you're in another part of the world looking back.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's always helpful.
Kathy.
I've never written a letter to editor or anything like that, but you know, like I read a blog, right? It's from where I sit. So, right? So, I was just curious, like, if you get something published and say, like, you know, someone that disagrees with it, do they then write back? And is it like just ongoing war forever? Like, you know, because because, you know, like, people get nasty, especially when they're on their computers, because they think the screen is protecting them. So some person can be sitting there in the underwear writing you a nasty letter, you know? I mean, does that happen?
So I would say in terms of like, there have been very few cases I've seen where publications will consistently publish like multiple back and forth between,
Okay,
between two people. But to your point about like, yeah, like it's very possible that you'll get, especially like on publications that have comment sections, not that you have to read them, but if you do, like it's almost guaranteed you'll get some nasty comments. The one that I got published in the Washington Post really pissed some people off. And got like all kinds of nasty grams from people. So that is unfortunately a reality of putting yourself out there. As you know, Kathy. But I think, yeah, it's rare to see that play out from like the publication's perspective.
It is funny.
It is funny when it happens.
There was this I think saying kind of in the early days of the internet, like don't feed the trolls. Which I don't think really applies anymore. I love my trolls. Like I'm a big believer in cultivating my trolls to serve my needs and my ends. Like trolls offer you free engagement, and they offer you, you know, which is the most important thing when you're trying to get a message out there. If a big angry troll is out there, you know, commenting on an article in the comment section or something, or on social media, they're just pushing your message further out there, and more people are going to read it.
Okay.
It drives traffic. And so, you know, it's always annoying when people disagree with you, especially if they're very mean about it. But they're also doing free labor on your behalf, which I always think is always kind of nice unexpected benefit. They think they're advocating for themselves, but actually they're helping you. So, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Alice?
What do you feel about humor as a way to win over, persuade, and win over somebody to your point of view? I know these subjects people tend to write about are very serious, but humor is a very powerful tool. How do you feel about that?
Personally, I think the rule with humor, so it can be really hard to convey tone in a print publication, right? And so, like, if you're going to incorporate humor, be prepared for the inevitability that some people it's gonna go over their head and they're gonna take you literally. But I think you're right that like it can resonate with some people. So I wouldn't like rule it out. I just think you have to make sure that it serves your message and that it comes across in the way that you're intending.
Yeah, it's really hard to be funny. It's hard to be funny anywhere, but especially in a very short piece of fiction. But if you could do it, absolutely.
If you're very clever, it can be a very powerful tool.
Yeah, and if you're funny, you should go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Janice.
Thank you.
That last point reminds me of how important it is to have different people read your writing, because you never know how something is going to strike someone, or even if you're using a word in a way that is totally different than how somebody else would understand it. And so we're talking about something that's meant to, change hearts and minds or convince people to take action or whatever. You really got to increase your effectiveness any way you can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I find writing these types of pieces to be a great challenge because it really forces you to be like clear and concise in a way that you're not in other writing, because you're so limited and because you have all of these audience considerations and all of that, you really have to understand what you're trying to do in and out. And really look at it through multiple lenses to make sure that it's going to have the effect that you want. So that's a great point. Folks are asking, this is a great segue, if there's any upcoming events. Well, there sure is. So next Thursday at 2 p.m., which I know is a tough time for people who work a traditional schedule, but the reason we're doing it then is because that's when legislators are going to be in the building. We are having the New Hampshire Hands Off Medicaid Coalition is hosting a rally at 2 p.m. at the State House. We're going to have a bunch of speakers. We're going to have people tabling. We're going to have all kinds of good stuff. So if you can come and support, we are really trying to get the message across specifically to Governor Ayotte that the proposed cuts to Medicaid in the budget are unacceptable and that we are not going down without a fight about them. We, as many of you know, have tried to reach out to her and her staff literally hundreds of times via email, phone call, hand-delivered letters, meeting requests, and she has ignored every single one of them. And so we are taking direct action because we will not be ignored, and we know that this is too important. So if you go on Facebook, how do I get the information to you about this? I'll send a follow-up email that has the slides of this presentation and a link to that event information so that you have all of that. And if you're able to join us, would love to have you. Oh, Janice, yes, thank you for doing that. Patricia asked if we could share a link to the Union Leader LPE, and Janice did that. Great.
So I got to this meeting because I happened to actually send something to Carol today saying, hey, would you look this over? And she said, there's this webinar tonight. So, I mean, I heard about it literally 2 hours before it happened. So I'm not on your email list. And I'm not sure, I'm not sure how much I want to be part of New Hampshire campaigns because I'm not a New Hampshireite anymore. But I'm just wondering, to get the link to the recording, which, I was sharing this with people in my groups an hour before, and they're like, I can't make it. What's the best way to?
Yeah, I'm realizing actually now that I've said that since this was an open link and not something we registered for, I don't have all of your emails. So what I'm going to do is this. So Lewis said Abel will post the link to the recording after the event, I assume on your socials. Yeah, cool. So that'll be there. But I will also put my email address in the chat. Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. If you think of any follow-up questions, again, my email is in the chat. Feel free to email me. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Colin and Jules, for providing this, and
Thank you.
be sharing this out with as many people as we can to get this message. So I know some people weren't able to make it tonight. So thank you all for showing up.
Thank you.
Guys, work.
Thank you.